Hi, it's Chris Moore with Senior Remodeling Experts. Welcome to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. It's a video series where we talk to different providers. We explore how families, professionals, and communities can come together to help older adults live safely, comfortably, and independently at home. I'm here to guide you, connect you with the right resources, and help make the rest of your life the best of your life. Welcome back to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. Today I have with me Jarrod Hines with Farmer Auctions, and Jarrod's piece in the puzzle is, what do we do with all this stuff? So I'll let Jarrod introduce himself and tell us a little more about his business and how it fits into Aging in Place.
Thank you, Chris. It's humbled that you included us in your series. So, transition is a word that we use almost every day. And unfortunately, part of transition is liquidation of assets and converting those assets to cash, whether they be personal assets or real property. And our family has been in this industry for 5 generations. We are both auction professionals and we are realtors as well. So when we meet with a family that's in transition, we're a turnkey solution, whether they want to sell the home at auction or conventionally, and then we can expose their personal property to hundreds of thousands of people. So that's where we fit into the whole transition and aging in place being a team sport.
Wow, I had no idea this was a 5 generation business. That is a remarkable achievement.
Thank you. Thank you. We own another company in West Virginia called Entrusted Auctions, and then we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to buy the Farmer family's business in 2016 in the Roanoke Valley.
Okay. So what are some of the problems that you solve? Describe to me a typical client that comes to you and is in need of your services. Obviously, the liquidation is part of the main part of what you do, but I'm sure that the emotions associated with making a decision to liquidate an estate or making a decision to downsize and to make some of their items, whether it be, like you said, real estate or household goods, maybe that have been in the family for generations and have a lot of memories tied up with them. Describe to me how you kind of help families negotiate that decision-making process and that emotional roller coaster that I'm sure you experience.
Sure. Yeah, daily. You're exactly right. It is emotional. And when I teach at auction school, I tell young auctioneers, if you don't have an ounce of empathy, then you're probably in the wrong business. Because the situations that you find yourself in the auction industry are typically situations that are delicate. Normally, they surround someone's passing, and you're right. They surround normally talking to a family who is not as informed about the market for personal property as we are, and may believe that some of the things that they remember that used to command high prices don't anymore. And then on the reverse is that there are categories of assets that command high prices that they would have had no idea had they not talked to an auction professional who deals in this every day. The challenge that we have, number one, is this little thing we call the internet. The internet has forever changed the definition of the word rare. Forever. Things are very prevalent and accessible now on many different portals where you can purchase them. Lifestyles have changed. Ways that we entertain and decorate have changed. And then we have a phenomenon, which is what you see a lot too, and so do I. We have a generation of people known as the baby boomers who are about to liquidate, roughly estimating over $30 trillion in assets over the next 10 or 15 years, which will cause inventory to rise and prices on some asset classes to continue to decline due to just, plain supply and demand. That can be a tough conversation. As a matter of fact, a marketing director, as we speak, is working on memorializing this on a brochure so that we can leave this with the family after we've had this discussion with them face to face, so they can better understand what assets command better prices, what assets have sort of fallen away.
So it's interesting you bring up the internet. How has the internet changed the auction industry in terms of reaching potential buyers? Because I remember as a kid, you went to an auction, and I grew up out in the country, and in the country, an auction was a social event. And you would go to the auction and you would see neighbors and maybe people you hadn't seen in months, and there was food and there was fellowship, and people would get together, and they would go see what's available at the auction. But it was the local farmers, it was the local people who lived in that community who came to the auction. And I'm sure that there were probably some professional buyers that would follow the auction circuit and look for bargains to scoop up. But certainly it's a very different reach than what you have today. I get emails from Proxibid, and there's hundreds and hundreds of online auctions every week that, I can go on and look for equipment or trucks or all kinds of things. If I'm in the market for something, and I can bid on any of these auctions all over the country. So how has that changed, your business in terms of what you can expect to get for an item?
Well, as you can imagine, the fifth generation trying to convince the fourth generation that we needed to move our business online was not an easy conversation. What we know to be true is that the marketplace is much broader, and the assets are exposed to hundreds of thousands of buyers across the duration of the auction, which, to your point, what that does is it mitigates risk for the client. The prices that you receive are a sampling of what hundreds of thousands of people thought those items were worth, not just 47 people standing in your backyard on a Saturday. Okay.
Right.
Now you're talking to the biggest auction fan in the world, live auction, love to call bids, love the backyard. I miss those days, and that was social networking, but that has moved online. And um, what we knew, what we know now that we really knew in our hearts back then was the majority of the people that are there in the yard on that particular Saturday are really not there to enthusiastically bid. They may buy one or two things, but they are there to see their neighbors, eat lunch, pay honor to the estate, and leave. What we know online is if there are 300 buyers registered for an auction online, I would argue that probably all 300 of those buyers have placed bids, because you do not have to register to look at the auction. You have to register to place a bid in the auction. And so it's more of a true data set online. It's a much broader marketplace. I've sold sports cars to people from California. One of our best jewelry buyers is from Texas. Okay.
Right.
The more desirable it is, the more shippable it is, the broader your market. And we've syndicated with partner companies that believe like we do, and we share content across multiple websites to expose the assets of our clients to, like I said, hundreds of thousands of buyers at the click of a button, just organically when we activate the auction.
On things like jewelry, is there a like coins or some of those kinds of collectible things that could be graded or certified, or is there a process if you have an estate that has um some fine jewelry or some old coins or that kind of thing? Do you do anything to certify the value, or is it totally caveat emptor?
It's both. We
Okay.
have built a model where we go out of our way to qualify the finer things that cross our path: jewelry, coins, firearms, cars, those types of things. So we have the areas for, and when I say the area, I'm talking south of Richmond. Foremost coin appraiser in Southern Virginia is on our staff. I tease him that he is practically a savant when it comes to appraising coins. We sell probably $750,000 to $1 million in coins a year, and Mr. Wall evaluates those, looks for the nuggets, and there's metallurgical value, then there's scarcity value, both
Mhm.
when it comes to coin. Same thing with jewelry. We have a gentleman that works at our facility that will scrutinize and evaluate the jewelry. If something is determined to be precious and needing a closer look, we work with a gemologist in Roanoke who will then take it to the next level and inspect and evaluate that piece of jewelry even further. We're a federal firearms agent, so we have a gun expert on staff. We've sold gun collections, Chris, that number over 300 pieces. And because we're a federal firearms agent, that market is the entire United States because we can ship domestically. And the buyers have the confidence after they've seen the descriptions that we've written that we know what we're talking about. We have an adjunct staff member who will evaluate and appraise classic cars for us as well on demand too. And so we have made the concerted effort. We are a full-time, not a hobby, professional auction services firm with capabilities to really evaluate and analyze almost anything we find.
Yeah, because I mean that makes a big difference because if I've bought some things in online auctions, bought some equipment, bought my 1995 Harley Davidson Electra Glide Classic at a online auction in Wisconsin, just based on, the pictures and the description. And, certainly you take a defined risk when you do something like that. But, I enjoy it a lot and really have gotten a lot out of it. And so certainly that, buying something online and the first time I did it, go online and I'm bidding on something that I haven't seen. I mean, it's a little disconcerting when you're not used to playing in that sandbox.
Well,
And
we tell people that we have developed an atmosphere of trust. That's the phrase that I use. Okay. And we're certainly not infallible. If we misweighed the ring, we'll get it back. And if we made a mistake, we'll make it right. Right.
yeah, right.
That's how you develop a buyer base.
Mm-hmm.
And base.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So between your two companies, Jarrod, how many auctions a year do you do roughly?
We are going to average between 85 and 100 auctions a year. Almost every one of those comes organically through referrals from former sellers, from our buyer base, um, from cold calls because they found us on the internet, from our institutional friends like attorneys and trust officials at banks and things like that. So we have had the blessing of to not having to advertise, although we are embarking on that right now. But the neat thing about online auctions, to take it all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, is they are scalable. There is really no way that I have found that you could do 100 live in the front yard with tents and chairs and hot dogs auctions a year. You would absolutely physically kill yourself trying to do that many live auctions
Right.
in a calendar year. Also, online auctions eliminate weather. So we can have online auctions in January, in February, right? And they're just more scalable. We can help 4 to 5 clients at a time instead of one client every weekend.
And so if somebody comes to you and says, have, this stuff that, this estate, what have you, that I want to liquidate, do you then come in and look it all over and you divide it up into lots and you handle the whole thing from that point, from the time I call you and say, please sell this?
Yes. So the
For
first
me?
conversation is a vetting process on the phone, and my staff is probably better at this than I am. It's, asking the right questions about what types of asset classes are in the estate, trying to decide if it really makes sense from a mathematical standpoint after commissions and fees versus the sales volume of what they're going to have. And then if we believe that it is something that may end up needing to be an auction, then we travel to the site to see it firsthand. Okay. And there are going to be things that we see that they didn't tell us that are probably going to add value to the auction as well. But it's all a math problem, and we don't mean to be dismissive or disrespectful, but we also want to be conscious of their time and their pocketbooks. And if we feel like it's just going to be a lesson in futility because of the asset classes that are there, then we tell them that. And we would if we were across the street from their house. It's just good business. Right.
Right.
So so you're looking for what we call items in the predictable categories first: real estate, automobiles, jewelry, coins, guns, tools, machinery, a collection of something that still holds value like signs or railroad memorabilia or things like that, right? A couple of those categories really need to be present to help to underwrite the labor that goes into selling the lesser household things.
So you brought up commissions and fees. I mean, I know that there's a buyer premium, there's a percentage of the gross sales that goes to the auctioneer. And then there are additional fees associated with cataloging and just logistical kinds of work that's involved in hosting an auction.
As kindly as I can put this, if you run a professional full-time auction services firm and it's not a hobby, yes, there are. Back to the conversation we had about prices. Prices control return. And since prices on some of these asset classes have started to decline over the years, the days of being able to cover your staff's labor out of only the commission and the buyer's premium are over. Plus, wages have escalated exponentially as well.
You
And so,
think?
yes, so it is commission and labor. And it's the and labor part that can be somewhat of a mystery if it's just a complete and utter mess. It may be a beautiful mess, but you still have to turn it into an auction. And
Right.
back when furniture was selling for 40% more than it does now, and employees work for $8 an hour, this was not a problem. Okay, but those two pieces of the puzzle have totally reversed. And once you find people in this industry that know how to identify items and catalog them properly, it behooves you as the owner to compensate them properly. And it's a tough math problem. That's why a lot of those things, and like I said, in that predictable column, need to be present. So the math makes sense because there is a
Right.
labor budget. Now, the clients can sometimes, if they're local, they can do some of the advanced labor if they're willing. Most
Okay.
people can sort the china and the toys and the train memorabilia and the jewelry. You can at least sort it. You don't have to know which part of that is valuable and which is not. But you can save several $1,000s in labor just doing the advanced sorting.
Right. But I'm sure also there are families that, just want you to handle everything and,
Absolutely.
they got enough going on, as it is and just, take care
One
of
of my
business and
one of my favorite turnkey stories was a family that from Texas who had the relatives here in Roanoke. And unfortunately, their father and brother passed away within months of each other. And they literally owned houses on opposite sides of Williamson Road. And they flew into town, met with us for maybe 4 or 5 hours. They had 4 cars, 2 houses, about 80 guns, ammunition for those guns. They were antique collectors of really good stuff and coins. And they handed us the keys and said, "Go for it. Call us when you're done." And that was the attitude that they had. We want you to handle it because you're the experts. This is turnkey. We know you can sell the real estate too. And we sold one house conventionally and we sold one house at auction.
yeah. Well, and that's a great service for somebody, especially when they're out of state and they don't, they don't have the time or the inclination or the knowledge of the local market to take care of that kind of stuff.
Of course, we have vendors that we work with that clean houses and do junk removal and things like that too, that, also contribute to the process.
Do you ever get a estate where I remember when I was in college and I had a friend in his parents' house, this was in upstate New York, literally there was every room in that house was stacked to the ceiling with stuff. And there was a walkway to get through the room. And the only room in the house that had any standing room was the kitchen and the bathroom and their bedroom. And the rest of the house was stacked to the ceiling.
We call that Tuesday.
Okay.
Happens almost weekly or biweekly. Sometimes that hoard is a beautiful mess, and there are valuable things everywhere you look. And sometimes, as is the case with one we are working on here in Roanoke, we have thousands of pounds of paper to move to uncover the actual household goods. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I recently we found a locked small metal box that came out of my grandmother's stuff, and we tried and tried to unlock it, and finally, couldn't get it unlocked, and we broke into it. And most of what was in the box was all the correspondence of my grandmother settling her father's estate. It
Sure.
was copies of every letter she wrote to everybody. And one of the things that he owned a 1/320th portion of an oil well in Texas, which paid him a royalty of something on the order of $8 a month. And it was letters back and forth where she was like, how do I, you know, you know, how do I liquidate this item?
Yep.
But in the bottom of the box, we found a $1887 gold piece. So yeah, you just never know.
Yeah. So back to labor. We tell our clients, if you're looking for the lowest cost option, we're not it. We don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper because we left a 3-carat diamond ring in a dresser drawer. We are going to
Right.
look. And if you don't want to hire a company that's not going to look and discover and scrutinize, then we're not the company to hire. Okay.
Right.
That adds value to your estate almost 90% of the time because we find things that you didn't even know were in the house. Okay. But it's labor intensive. It's labor intensive.
Sure.
We found an 1860 VMI class ring in a house in Dublin a few months ago. The family knew they had the ring. They didn't realize its significance. We were able to call VMI. The oldest ring they have is 1910. Our Civil War experts did some research and found out that the soldier that owned that ring was with Stonewall Jackson in Harper's Ferry at John Brown's hanging.
Wow.
And we believed, and some of the experts we consulted with, we were thinking it was worth between 8,000 and 9,000 and sold for 13,000. And I've got stories like that where it was beneficial that they enlisted our services. And I don't mean to be immodest, but with the type of staff that we have and our ability to identify things, if we don't get a look, there's a good chance you're going to lose money because we find things like that all the time.
Right. Because I mean, I'm sure if that ring had gone on the block without that kind of research behind it and without that kind of provenance, it would have sold for much less because nobody knows what the story behind it is. Reminds me of that song, "The Touch of the Master's Hand," where they talk about the violin and they're bidding $1, $2, $3, and then the old man comes from the back of the crowd and he comes up there and plays it, and now it's going for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, because the value of that piece was made known to the people bidding on the item.
And again, we don't mean to sound infallible. We're certainly not, but I think we find more than we don't. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. That's the difference in doing it professionally and dedicating services and staffing to this and just running it as a hobby, as a supplemental income to something else somebody might do. Right. And I stand firm on that. It's the model that we've built and we believe in it.
Yeah. Well, it's just like in any other field of endeavor, the difference between, hiring a professional and doing it yourself is like night and day.
I don't walk into the emergency room with chest pains and ask to be introduced to the cheapest cardiologist.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's about the way you need to look at it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been very interesting. I've learned a lot about the auction industry. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And how can people reach you if they are in a position to want to learn more about your service?
So our office number is 540-384-0100. You can find us on the web at farmerauctionsonline.com or intrustedauctions.com, which is our West Virginia brand.
And what geographic area do you serve?
Great question. We are going to serve Lexington to Bristol, and we're even licensed in Tennessee. We had a huge auction in Johnson City last year. So probably Lexington, Virginia to the Tri-Cities area in Tennessee, south to Danville, south to Hillsville, and into West Virginia, south of Charleston, West Virginia, all the way to the Virginia border. So we've got a radius. If you start in Charleston, West Virginia, and draw a circle, and you go about 3 hours out of that circle, that's pretty much our radius. Now, the farther out we go, the more lucrative it has to be, and our staff would have to lodge at some of these places like they do, bless their heart, or there would be a lodging investment for the client. But we have had people from that far away that were adamant that we conduct their auction, and so we have to consider logistics when we do that.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that completely. All right, Jarrod. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Any final thoughts?
No, just I really appreciate the opportunity to tell the public more about our business, and thank you for thinking of us.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
See you now.